When humans discovered FTL communication, they were excitedly ushered into the galactic circle. It was almost cute watching them interact with the 97 species for the first time. Diplomats, gifts, cultural exchanges. Humanity set up trade links fast. They accepted any kind as tourists and were eager to share. And then there was the Velgrond Empire, the only species with active control over more than 7 worlds. The Empire's military and economic might was vast. Humans sent envoys to the capital world, but received the awful news of the crew's demise. The Velans didn't offer an apology, just a statement that the humans would be cremated in fire, as per Earth tradition. They lied. It was a pair of Ilian journalists who discovered the truth. They had snuck deep into the industrial heart of the Empire and found a disturbing secret. They never made it out, but their information survived the FTL journey through space, making its way to all across the galaxy. The information was tested, verified, hours passed. Istanbul was the home of humanity's gathering place, the Gaia Forum. Alexander Aurelius approached the stand. He looked fair for his age, but politics makes anyone look old. In front of him sat nearly 1,000 representatives and delegates, but billions were watching live. Trillions, if you count the 64 species broadcasting the message on their own worlds. There was a morbid curiosity in watching an innocent young species surrender to the harsh reality of the universe. Aurelius took a shaky breath. One more, steady this time. Representatives of Earth. And those off-planet. Welcome. We have all seen the truth, a truth almost too horrible to face. And yet we must. He pauses for a moment, letting the tension rise. When we received the news that the first human envoys to the Velgrond Empire died before arrival, we were rightly devastated, experimented on, tortured. The revelation sat in every human heart like an ice-cold stone. And when the Velans had learned everything about human pain, behaviorism, and desperation, they started breeding slaves. As we speak, thousands of humans are enslaved in the Velgrond steam veins. Thousands, who never knew of their home, their people, their stories. Aurelius stopped again, just for a moment, to let it sink in. Before I came to this hallowed hall to address you all, I spoke with delegates from 75 alien species. None were brave enough to join me here. They say we humans are too young. They say countless species and unions have crumbled against the might of the Velgrond Empire. They think they protect us. We cannot not be idly complicit with the Velgrond Empire's evil as so many of our allies are. The Velans have shown us their nature, and now we must demonstrate ours. For there is another truth. A truth so bright none can look away. It is our nature to fight for what we know to be right and good. The tense crowd had begun to nod along. Stamping feet drummed along with the speech. Today I heard the sorrowful cries of our people, and I was moved to a righteous rage. I know you feel as I do, for I feel the heat in the air. I see your furious passion rising like the sun. How dare they? How dare they take our brothers and sisters, our mothers and fathers? Countless millennia of Velan hegemony must end. Trillions across the galaxy watched with rapt attention. You know what the banner above me represents. I call upon all humanity to unite in our common purpose against our common evil. As our ancestors did, we will wage total, all-out war against the Velgrond Empire. The crowd cheered, whistled, and stomped, whilst alien observers were filled with questions. How could a species this kind and good-natured choose to go to war? The supreme might of our people will smash against the Empire, and the galaxy will quake. We will raise Velan cities. Their deserts will be turned to glass, oceans to steam, and mountains to valleys. Our deeds will echo through space and time, and all the universe will forever know the price of oppression. Our great war may last decades. Decades of work and sacrifice and struggle. But I say, We choose the struggle. We choose to fight because we know the value of our cause. So we go on. We fight hard without mercy or hesitation. We accept no surrender and offer no quarter. We will liberate every enslaved human and destroy all traces of this sick empire. To war, I say, or to war. Humans across the galaxy shouted and chanted, "War! War!" Light years away, Velen strategists burst into discussion. There was a shared telepathic feeling in the cocoon that no Velen fully recognized. Fear. Even further away, the Ilian priestess lounged, surrounded by advisors. My priestess, these humans cannot hope to win a prolonged conflict against such a superior enemy. It is in the interest of the galaxy to de-escalate this conflict. The priestess slowly stood, then strolled toward a large flat crystal, still portraying the image of Aurelius, mid-speech. She ran a finger down his cheek. I met him once. When I visited Earth. He was younger then, his eyes so bright and wide. The priestess cocked her head as she stared into his fiery gaze. I never imagined he could be so frightening. A heavy silence had overtaken the house, broken only by the sounds of a clasping belt buckle. Jane dressed quietly, but she was keenly aware of her observer. Sitting in a tight ball on the bed was her fawn partner, Ambinox. Jane avoided turning around as she slipped on her old Star Sniper uniform. She knew that seeing those big wobbly eyes might cause her to break. Humans and fawn had become close allies quite quickly. The protective and competitive human nature synergized well with the trusting and affectionate fawns. You don't have to go. The fawn mewed. You've already given up so much for your country. You're retired. That speech wasn't meant for you. Please stay. Jane heard the words, but her gaze was elsewhere, and her mind following. A small shelf on the wall held a variety of heirlooms, centuries of her family's history. She saw the cracked leather book and remembered the stories of her ancient ancestors and their mass exodus from brutal slavery. She looked at the folded piece of red, white, and blue cloth and remembered her ancestors who fought an empire to create freedom for their descendants. A faded metal represented the opposite, a great evil which robbed and slaughtered her people. Jane recalled her brave ancestors who crossed an ocean to meet such an evil head-on and destroyed it. Finally, a small lump of charred wood. Black summer had seen every forest on the Australian continent engulfed in a raging inferno. Jane thought of her grandfather, who volunteered to fight the flames and never returned. Jane took a deep breath and turned to her precious fawn. Ambi, I've been called. I must answer. The moment interplanetary travel became available, Cohen fled Earth. After years of feeling so constrained by his uptight, wealthy parents, he had no problem stealing a chunk of cash and buying a Severa Model I two-seater ship. He didn't really have a goal. He just wanted to be comfy and have fun. First, he tried to visit the fawn homeworld to no avail. Their no alien policy was ironclad, for the same trusting nature which enabled incredible collaboration also opened the door to brutal manipulation. Instead, he opted for Viedc. It sat in the far reaches of the galaxy. Few humans had any desire to visit the planet when more entertaining and prosperous worlds were much closer. The journey took ages, but Cohen super-slept through most of it. He wasn't about to waste aging on transport time. Still, he grumbled when forced to awaken for the final portion of the journey. As if I'm gonna help in an emergency. The ship's a better pilot than me. Cohen yawned. The ship descended through space, into the cloudy atmosphere of Viedc. The ship automatically handled landing permissions. Cohen was keen to see the landscape below, but the thickness of the cloud cover forced him to wait. As a massive jolt tore through the ship. The ripping of metal and snapping of plastic was instant. Every joint and bolt was tested, and the toolbox Cohen left on the floor flew directly into his face with a brutal thonk. The console began blaring sounds and lights. Although Cohen couldn't see anything through the clouds, he could feel that the ship was upside down. He scrunched his eyes closed as blood leaked down his face. A spider web crack split through the clear window. As the clouds disappeared, the ship's cameras immediately began calibrating to the environment, using every major and minor function available to slow the descent of the malfunctioning ship. Cohen forced an eye open to see an entire wing had been ripped off. He reached for the controls, but his vision was fading. Cohen fought for a moment, but he couldn't resist closing his eyes again. I don't want to die. Human. Human, wake up. The high-pitched voice cut through Cohen's fuzzy mind like a skewer. Pain. He tried to open his eyes, but couldn't. They were caked with dried blood. He rubbed some away and forced his eyes open. What the hell? He lay on a plain of purple dirt, his emergency parachute strapped to his body. Cohen ordered a reluctant arm beneath his body and pushed up onto an elbow. His ship was gone. Flatland lay before him, rising into hills a few miles away. High above were permanent dark clouds. Human, can you hear me? He could. Floating above Cohen was a shimmering sphere of liquid metal, pulsating and shifting. Cohen tried to speak, but could only cough. His head ached terribly. His limbs were sore. Human, please help. My sprine needs help. The words took a moment to register. Cohen allowed his eyes to focus properly on the sphere. Recognizing his attention, the thing moved. Split. One portion remolded into a tiny model of Cohen's ship. The other formed a shape he didn't recognize, but when the sphere showed the two models flying, colliding, and falling, he understood the message. Sprine. Cohen's mind was mud. Yes, human. She's in danger. Please help. Cohen checked his limbs and torso for breakages. His ship had done an excellent job protecting his body. The wound on his forehead didn't seem as bad as it felt. Not knowing whatever else to do, he stood. As soon as he did, the strange sphere began moving toward the hills. This way, human. Quickly. Cohen obeyed, unclipping the chute and trudging forward. There were 1,000 things he'd rather be doing right now, but he couldn't exactly ignore a literal cry for help. What or why, what do I call you? I'm B-Box. My sprine is named Phylac. The sphere shifted to present the bust of a small alien head with 2 antennae and a massive cheesy smile. Quickly, human. Cut me some slack. Cohen muttered. Why didn't you contact some real help? I just crashed too, you know. Human, the nearest sprine bubble is 400 horizons away. You're Phylac's only hope. Yeah, okay. The two marched across the purple plain, then up a steep hill. Once atop it, Cohen could instantly spot the issue. Not far off was the beginning of a wide ravine which cracked the land in two. It stretched all the way to the horizon. Perched precariously on a close edge was the flaming ruins of some kind of ship. Its base shape was similar to human ships, but it seemed to be covered in rows of scales. There, human. Come on. B-Box zoomed toward the crash site. Cohen followed. As he descended the hill, he could see further off were the remains of his own ship. Hundreds of shards of metal and plastic had hit the land like little asteroids. When Cohen finally made it to the crashed ship, he paused to take some deep breaths. B-Box was having none of it. Human, over here, it called, forming into the shape of an arrow. The ship was larger than Cohen's, but not by much. He stepped through the torn open wall into the ruins. As he did, a gust of wind blew in from the south, and the entire structure creaked, threatening to fall down the ravine. Laying on the floor was the sprine. Both antennae were crumpled, and a light green arm was twisted the wrong way, revealing frayed and torn threads within. Trapping this creature was a large panel of smooth coppery material. Phylac's deep green eyes were open wide, and the moment they locked with Cohen's, the human was hypnotized. Human, Snap out of it. Viedc's words helped, and a confused Cohen shook his head. Sorry. I'm Cohen. I'm gonna help you. Hold tight. The Sprine blinked, their face wrought with pain and fear. They had never seen a human before, a strange creature without antennae. Instead, thick limbs and the smell of smoke. Cohen grasped the panel, but it was too heavy to lift. He scrounged around, looking for items as he recalled his physics education. Fulcrum? Lever? Simon, what have we got? The box was no help, instead staying by Phylak's side and repeating phrases in a language Cohen's translator didn't know. Gotcha. Cohen spotted the perfect piece of debris, but when he reached out to grab it, felt the immediate burn of hot metal. Fuck, he shouted, blowing on his hand and shaking it in the air. His outburst seemed to scare the Sprine, who was now staring at Viedc with a look of desperation. This time Viedc spoke so Cohen could understand too. It's okay, Phylak. This human is helping. All was paused when a distant howl cut through the air. Cohen glanced at Viedc, who seemed to shrink. A second howl. A third. From far away, a chorus of howls that felt uncomfortably similar to wolves. Human. The Cyclojev smelled Phylak's resin. Hurry. Ready. Cohen could see shapes forming in the distance. Bodies were fast approaching. What are they? Cohen asked as he began moving faster. The box morphed into the shape of a creature with long fangs and 4 legs. No, not leg spears. What the fuck? As a surge of adrenaline flowed through Cohen's body, he ignored the debris and stomped toward the Sprine. He planted his feet, found a tight grip on the panel, and pulled. Human. No. It's... Viedc was interrupted by a strained grunt of exertion. Phylak watched the human's neck and arms shake as he raised his head and howled into the sky, a roar equaling the approaching monsters. The panel groaned and slowly rose into the air. Viedc began running entirely new calculations on the human's abilities. But the moment the pressure was released, Phylak slithered their way out from underneath the panel. As soon as they were clear, Cohen let go, stumbling back a few paces. His head pounded with awful pressure, and his muscles were totally spent. His mind began to fracture again as exhaustion overtook him. It's too late, Viedc. A voice brought him back. It was different, lighter. It was the Sprines. There's nowhere to run. I'm sorry, Viedc. I'm sorry, human. A pack of around 12 shambling creatures were approaching the ruined ship barely a minute away. Their pace was incredible. Is this how it ends? Eaten by some weird alien monsters on some far-off planet? Cohen never really had much to live for. He didn't have any heroic goals or loving partners. So why did he feel this tingling ache in his heart? Why, despite his total exhaustion, was his breathing growing faster? From somewhere that Cohen didn't know existed, a thought of steel emerged. I will not die here. He surveyed the ruins with renewed purpose, spotting a thin broken pipe running down a wall. The brackets holding it in place were all bent out of shape. Cohen tore out the metal pipe, releasing a hiss of blue gas. It didn't bend easily in his hands. The ends were jagged and sharp. The only issue was texture. The pipe was oddly slippery. The box seemed to register this as Cohen did, and zoomed forward. It morphed, wrapping around the middle of the pipe. It offered Cohen a strong grip, and he took it. Phylak watched Cohen work with a sense of wonder. They were amazed not only by the human's focus but the trust Viedc seemed to have. The Cyclogate had arrived. The pack of 12 paused in a wide ring around the crashed ship. Cohen stepped forward, putting himself between them and the fallen Sprine. Phylak looked up at Cohen's broad back, and their fear was tempered with a note of relief. Each of these creatures was covered in thin strands of black hair and stood 8 feet tall. The bodies were no bigger than a dog's, but their legs were long talons, sharp and pointed. They poked through the dirt, offering unnatural stability. The largest bared its fangs and cried out, a mournful, vengeful war cry. The others joined in, an evolved practice which often caused their prey to surrender entirely to fear. Not Cohen. Not today. He bared his own teeth and beat his chest with a closed fist. He released another roar and stomped his boots on the ground. Come on, come get some, he hissed. The cyclic lodged the largest, rushing forward and leaping into the air, attempting to crash down on Cohen with its 4 weapons. Cohen flipped the pipe in his grip, then threw it like a javelin at close range. The weapon shunted through the cyclage's body mass, which fell unceremoniously into the dirt. It landed on its own limbs, one of which snapped off at the joint. The others screamed in disapproval and sauntered forward. Cohen dashed to the dead cyclage between him and the rest, and ripped out his weapon just in time to dodge a leaping alien. The cyclage did not fight as a team, but individually. Once the largest had died, the next strongest took a turn. Cohen dodged and ducked around wicked swipes, receiving a razor gash on his shoulder before plunging his weapon up through the cyclage's body. It leaked black bile. There was no moment to breathe before the next pounced. This one survived longer, swinging blades back and forth. Cohen didn't rush. He watched carefully, learning the patterns of attack. He stepped back over the first fallen cyclage, and briefly noticed the detached leg. Cohen darted forward, sacrificing a cut along his back to jam his weapon into his foe. Knowing the next would strike quickly, he hopped backward, leaned down and picked up the detached limb. B-box blasted from the belly of the cyclage to Cohen's new weapon, again forming a long handle to the 6-foot blade. Falak was filled with a sense of awe as the human wielded a cyclage talon as a weapon. He spun it in his hands. Such a long, wide blade should be heavy, but it wasn't. He whipped it forward, stabbing at the grounded leg of the next cyclage, which tumbled. He took a moment to stab the thing, then rushed forward to attack the next. Cohen's sword fighting skills were limited to video games and childhood playtime, but he was much stronger than these creatures. His arms had more joints too. He could wield their weapons better than they could. It seemed like the cyclage realized that too, because when their numbers dropped to 3, they fled. Cohen jerked around, looking for his next enemy. His breath came out in ragged pants, and his clothes were covered in sizzling bile. All he saw around him was steaming carnage and a very, very surprised Sprine. Cohen felt cold as the adrenaline left his veins. As his body finally gave in, one last thought flowed. I refuse to die. Jane stepped out of the self-driving taxi and slammed the door with more force than was necessary. Consistent and loud forced advertisements were perhaps the worst invention of the millennium, so Jane thought, at least. The car rolled away, and Jane took a deep breath to calm herself. She stood in the heart of Fort Cavazos. As Earth turned away from war in the mid-2000s, armies had transformed into broad emergency services legions ready to fight flames, floods, radiation, and any other catastrophe. But right now, Earth didn't need big fire hoses, it needed weapons. Soldiers crawled through the fort like ants, dragging vehicles, crates, and all manner of wartime equipment from deep storage. I thought the American Republic swore to destroy those. Jane thought as she watched a broad man heave a handheld nuclear cannon onto his shoulder. I guess we're lucky they didn't. Being enclosed by the wide fence and endless noise made Jane long for her own little slice of Texas. Her thoughts were interrupted by a crisp greeting. We're Brigadier General. Ma am. Hearing her rank, she turned to face a young man surely younger than 20. She nodded. I'm here to report to General Bowie. Yes, ma'am. He's expecting you. I'm to escort you immediately to the war room. Read on. The bouncy soldier turned and began striding away. Jane struggled to match his pace, Her legs felt stiff. She remembered when she could march all day and then kickbox in the evening. Those times were long behind her. The war room was packed. High-ranking officers sat around a large table, while assistants and support staff streamed behind, supplying files, messages, and even coffee. Jane saluted upon entry and was beckoned to the last empty chair. Before she sat, General Bowie stood, reaching out for a warm handshake. The man was ancient, older than Jane by a good decade. His grip was firm. "It's good to see you again," he opened with a smile. "I was so glad to hear you've signed up again. I had you rerouted here as soon as I knew." Before Jane could respond, he continued, drawing the room's attention. "Everyone, this is Brigadier General Jane Levy. She's personally responsible for sniping 4 Apocalypse-class asteroids, and is the only person to hit one outside the solar system." Murmurs of approval filled the room. It wasn't long ago that such a feat would have been considered totally impossible human accuracy on a cosmic level. From the other side of the table, an eye-patched man called out, "She's perfect. Exactly what we need at Via Adra." Jane sat. She knew to listen before speaking, to absorb information like a sponge. Her subconscious would process it faster than her waking mind ever could, and then feed it back. Few humans could develop such an ability. Few had the required trust in their intuition and instinct, and even fewer had received decades of training. General Bowie gulped down the last of his coffee and pushed the mug aside. The table before him was covered in paper maps. "Here's the situation, Levy. Intel shows 14 photon missiles were launched yesterday from the Velen capital world. We've calculated they will arrive in our solar system in 30,000 years, give or take." "Which is a problem," interrupted another officer, "because physics says that journey should take 300,000 years. Those Velen pricks have found a way to move a weapon 10 times the speed of light." The depth of the enemy's technological prowess seemed to weigh heavily in the room. The task ahead was enormous. No one complained. Bowie continued, "Not only that, but the Velens have started sending ships to guard space tunnels. The space tunnel system connected the galaxy. The magic-like technology was crafted by an ancient species long gone but valued dearly by the current inhabitants of the galaxy. Pairs of large rings had been manually placed at different points. Each pair had the ability to entangle, folding the space between them. On the table lay a map of the space tunnels. It looked like a flowchart, tunnels linking different regions together. There was only one tunnel near Earth's solar system, but like connecting trains, one could transfer between tunnels to reach far-off locations. The tunnels were priceless. Trade, culture, and armies traveled through them. No species in living memory had succeeded in controlling them for more than a few decades. The current galactic circle was insistent on equitable and free use. The Empire has broken convention and placed ships on both sides of their local tunnels. They're conducting inspections of passing ships looking for humans. Intel shows more ships moving toward further tunnels. The Empire possesses enough weaponized ships to patrol every single tunnel in the galaxy, and then some. Crowning their fleet are 14 hive ships." Jane tilted her head. She hadn't heard of those before. Big. Moon-sized. Self-sufficient. Slow, sure, but each one contains its own society and military. "How many do we have?" Jane asked. She already knew the answer but was hoping to be wrong. "None. Our fleet is composed of a few hundred space jets, 5,000 cargo ships, and 3 solar cruisers. We do not have the capacity to meet the Empire on anything close to even footing." Jane stared at the map. "And yet, if we don't stop them, we'll be totally isolated from the rest of the galaxy." "Exactly. First, we must prevent the Velgrond Empire from controlling the space tunnels with their conventional weapons. This means developing and producing ships and weapons on a scale never before seen on our world. Next, we must advance on the Velgrond Empire's worlds and free our prisoners. Finally, we must develop a solution to the photon missiles. This will be more than a technological challenge. You see, the Velan species are billions of years old. They'll have no problem fighting a slow war of attrition and waiting for the photon missiles to hit. The more pressure they apply on the battlefield, the fewer resources we can commit to developing a solution. Jane continued to stare at the map. There was just so much to take in, so much to process. When she took a shot at an asteroid, there was always a perfect moment. At first, she'd be overwhelmed by the angles, math, and velocity. But as she gazed into space and let the thoughts coalesce, she would always experience a single moment of perfection. When all the numbers added up, when that gut feeling came, that's when she fired. She wished for that feeling right now. Instead, a swirl of information surrounded her. It took her a few moments to realize everyone was watching her, waiting for a response. Understood. What's my role in this? The eye-patched general stood. He unraveled a map and placed it on the table, employing some empty mugs to keep it flat. Right here is Via Adra. It's the furthest planet from Earth, where we retain a large presence. We've got a deal with one of the local clans that allows us to use their land. We've been using it to train pilots. Now, we'll use it to train soldiers. Why? Jane pushed. Why not train here on Earth? The man smiled. Because the water on Via Adra heals wounds. The air itself contains chemicals that make you feel a little more positive. Breathing literally improves your mood and speeds up your mental processing. Where commercial studies show student pilots learn 45% faster on Via Adra. He leaned forward, looking straight into Jane's soul. And we need you to protect it. Protect both sides of the nearby space tunnel. I understand, but my skill set is rather specific. I've never developed strategy or led a large SC. The man raised a hand to interrupt. I don't want you leading the defense, I want you to be our secret weapon. The Velan's ship cannons, as far as we know, are accurate to a distance of 10 billion miles. Your longest confirmed hit is 12. What's more, we believe the Velans only know of our technological abilities. There's no reason to think they are aware of the Star Sniper program or the developing psychic talents within. Via Adra will serve as our momentum breaker. That's where we hold the line. Jane clenched her fists under the desk. She'd never felt such crushing pressure. When do I ship out? You chose this path. Don't be afraid to walk it. They're all watching your example. Alexander Aurelius consciously unclenched his jaw. A robotic voice echoed through the cargo bay. Doors open in 30 seconds. Aurelius finally stood. His cloak swept behind as he paced the busy cargo bay. A cabal of human assistants tried to assist, brushing dust from his shoulders, adjusting his cloak, and offering makeup. A single raised finger sent them scattering. It's time. With me, Ambassador Lee. Not a lot was known about Sylvia. They were a populous, standoffish species, and they held a millennia-long grudge against the Velgrond Empire. Alexander Aurelius was about to convince their leader to abandon 5,000 years of neutrality. Or rather, he was about to try. The two stood together before the aluminum sliding doors. A reverberating buzz, and the way is opened. Alexander is forced to squint. A blistering light shines in, painting the wall behind a bright yellow. When the doors grind to a halt, the view causes every human on the ship to gasp. Every human except Alexander. A city of gold stands in the distance. Sunlight reflects off a trillion tiny surfaces, painting the entire landscape in dancing glitter. Sprinkled in the vast surrounding sands are diamonds. Their shimmering essence combines with the golden light to form a resplendent kaleidoscope. Linking the city and ship was a singular road. A path formed of gemstones. No human on the ship had ever imagined such a display of wealth. It was truly mind-boggling. Alexander kept his face flat and his smile pasted on. A ramp connects the cargo bay to a landing zone of speckled rainbow colors. Standing below are a handful of Sylvans and some shiny caterpillar-shaped vehicles. Alexander beckons his ambassador and descends. When his boots touch alien ground, he is greeted warmly. The lead Sylvan, a slender creature with moist skin and a scarred face, shakes his hand. The handshake is a little slimy, but Alexander notes the awareness of human customs. He returns the favor by spitting into his hand, demonstrating his fluids are free of infection. The Sylvans copy. Welcome, Alexander Aurelius, Master of Earth. I am known to my allies as Portus, and to my enemies as Zoriel. My master, Tazarasaroth, greets you. I am honored to stand before you. Alexander glanced past his host at the Golden City. I was surprised when you rerouted us from the spaceport. Portus grinned. The fastest way to tell a predatory species was the smile. Species evolved from prey animals that did not smile with bared teeth. Alexander clocked the knowledge away for later while the Sylvan continued. Yes, my friend. Our master believed the spaceport to be ill-fitting. We have sought to create an environment where you humans feel comfortable. The whole city was built for you. It's amazing. Ambassador Lee blurted out. Even the path here, it's all jewels. Portus' grin grew wider. Of course, and the mortar is platinum. He gestured toward the desert sands beside the road. You're welcome to dig around and find some souvenirs to take home. There are plenty of rocks on Earth, Alexander stated, whipping a glance over to ensure Ambassador Lee didn't move. We deeply appreciate this meaningful welcome, and we're very keen to discuss galactic matters. Of course. Please, follow me. Portus led the pair to one of the shiny vehicles parked beside the jeweled path. Each was composed of 5 spherical sections, linked like train cars. Ambassador Lee was shown to a separate section, but Alexander pulled him back by the arm. I apologize, Portus. We humans must stick together. I understand completely. He replied, but the way he grumbled to his own section made Alexander think that perhaps he didn't. Whatever the case, sitting in the glass-topped section of this vehicle gave him time to think. Ambassador Lee was endlessly amused with the mechanical functioning of the vehicle. He pressed buttons, felt the seating material, and toyed with the lighting controls. Aurelius couldn't care less. What a strange encounter. A city of gold? Jeweled roads and a diamond desert? It's so much. Too much. Alexander's fists grew tight. These Sylvans know we value these minerals. To show us a city of them, to invite us to dig in the dirt? The Sylvans want us to feel small. Alexander opened his mouth to warn Lee to constrain himself, but stopped. There could be microphones in this vehicle. Hell, he'd have put mics in on Earth. The journey toward the Golden City was short. The city was purpose-built for this visit, and stuck out of the desert like a sore thumb. Waiting on the inside of the city border was a small crowd. They lined the streets, waiting for a glimpse of their alien visitors. Sylvan society existed in strict and total hierarchy. Each member wore facial scars, the number equivalent to their rank. No one was ever demoted, because any behavior which dishonored one's place in the hierarchy was punished with a lifetime of torture. The integrity of power was paramount, and once lost was gone forever. The only reason this crowd was allowed to form was with permission of the higher ranks. All this, Alexander knew. He had learned of the Sylvan hierarchy on his journey. As he traveled into the city, he watched the Sylvans with a keen eye. He looked upon creatures whose destiny was decided by others, and felt pity. If the Sylvans ally with humanity, are these the ones who will die in battle? Poor souls who never had a choice. The Sylvans waved with glee. Children held large posters depicting unrecognizable symbols. Alexander's eyebrows furrowed. It's undeniable that this species is prosperous and bountiful. Perhaps the masses actually enjoy the ease of submission. The thought entered Alexander's mind so easily, and it threatened to stay. It would be so simple to accept the shine and gleam of Sylvia as a result of virtue. But then he saw it, a police officer or city guard of some kind. They stood firm, controlling the crowd and ensuring a clear path for the vehicles. Attached to their belt was a whip. The vehicles stopped before a shining skyscraper. Portis' voice echoed through a speaker. "My master awaits."